Sup, everybody? This is Karak with ACG. One of my favorite movies of all time is the original Clash of the Titans. Not the new one, though I didn't actually hate that, but the old one with the bird that looked like it was made of tinfoil and the crappy stop motion and Burgess Meredith pre-Rocky showing up and helping out a dude who basically looked like he had the best hair known to man at the time. It was an awesome movie, and I loved the time frame. I liked Assassin's Creed Odyssey for sort of the same reason, and here we are less than 2 months out from Immortals Fenyx Rising, and I'm sort of trying to get excited, and I bet you are too, but other than the name of the game changing into something so generic, it might as well be called Game the Game. A lot of people don't even know what's going on in this title. But as luck would have it, Ubisoft had a preview event, and the initial look and art, I would say, for this game originally hinted at something that's sort of an epic mythological landscape and a fantasy to it, and we're sort of getting that as well, but we're getting it in a format I think that's going to be a little bit surprising and far more different than we initially realized. That's not exactly a bad thing, but the question is going to be brought up right away, and that's, is Fenyx, its look, its combat, its gameplay, as generic as the name? And in a heavy release window, one that sees Titan titles many years in the making, and at least one amazing looking remaster and a couple of Titanic releases from the exact same publisher, is Immortals Fenyx Rising, well, too generic to rise? Is it a lie in title form? Coming December 3rd to the PC, the Switch, the Xbox, the PlayStation, and even some system called the Stadia I've never heard of. Immortals has a vaguely Fable feel to it, and it's almost like it met Assassin's Creed on the street corner and decided to give it a high five. You have a good deal of air travel as well, since you are indeed outfitted with a pair of wings that allow for double jumping or attacks or gliding around. And this is a hodgepodge of different games, all smashed into one with an overarching art style. But how did this come about? Interestingly enough, game director Scott Phillips, this is directly from the wiki, said that the project originated from a software bug the team discovered during the development of Odyssey, which changed the humans on the player's crew into giant cyclops, and decided that would be a good idea to create a separate game that enhances that mythological side of Greece. Due to the positive reception of Odyssey, Ubisoft's management agreed to greenlight the project. And that project has you starting out as Phoenix, stuck on the Golden Isle, and you're quickly focused down a pathway to save the world from Typhon, who seeks revenge on the gods and starts straight up wrecking shit. To give you a good reflection of the game, I want to say first, the awkward and strange Breath of the Wild comparisons, let's get them out of the way. Yep, the game has stamina. Yep, it's got you gliding and some puzzles in a large open area to explore, as do about 1,000 other games. That's it. There are hundreds of games closer to Zelda than this one, and really comparing the two is like saying a couch is like a coffin if you made it out of wood and then died in the fucking thing. The more quickly you diverge and move away from that tight comparison, the better, because everything from the speed of play, the combat, the overall feel of the world, the tone, the story, the addition of the skills, non-breaking weapons, and a host more, they really are less like one another. And I think that's actually good if we do so, because there's nothing inherently wrong in the presentation of this game or the exploration. It's just that it's a bit like many games all put together, not like one particular one. It's quicker, it's got a friskier combat than a lot of other titles, and far more responsive than even Ubisoft's other games. It has a combo system that's a bit more like DMC, with a bit of beat 'em up mixed in and a little bit of shallowness. The world is more like a mix of a painting and a Saturday morning cartoon than anything else, and while the draw distance is packed up and sent out into the far reaches, the basic look of everything doesn't exactly inspire confidence, nor does the almost ever-present feel of, I've seen this already somewhere. But there's a dichotomy there. Because of that familiarity, it's easier, especially at the starting, to go, this looks a little bit basic. But as you continue to experience this game farther and farther in, something magical happens a little bit. And that's that it starts to present itself at a much more expert level than I think I originally expected. But what do I mean like that? Well, take for instance the combat. Even at its most busy, decidedly clean within its look, leaving you almost never at a time when it's so much confusing action happening on the screen it feels like an octopus fucked a fucking Spartan and you're a baby just swinging weapons afterwards. Some enemies require specific hits to take down, others require a ton or a mixture of smaller ones, and still others are easily defeated by air tossing them into the sky and matrix comboing the hell out of them. The game really does take a three-way tack between your exploration, your story-based moments, and that combat, but it seems to do it at a slightly different pace than a lot of other titles, and certainly more speedy than Zelda itself did it. But it's also got a clarity that, say, Assassin's Creed did not have, because Assassin's Creed has always been so much about vegetation in your face and trees everywhere, and sometimes you just get lost on where an enemy is. That really never seems to happen in this game. Also, because the animation is quicker, even though not necessarily perfectly fluid, utilizing combos and powers results in a much quicker display and reaction time. giving it a combat style that really does feel a little bit like a third-person brawler. There are some issues with the way the world presents itself. For example, everybody in the game world is frozen, resulting in you pretty much just running around, enemies standing there like they were hired to do something, but the boss showed up late, and so they don't exactly know what to do until you actually arrive. Zeus and Prometheus, who try to be funny narrators like some kind of cartoon, never really seem to nail it, and the game at those times does feel a bit solitary, though their humor tries to intersperse that. Now, while the music is more whimsical and lighthearted, and Gareth Coker does this, many times I would expect there to be music and there actually wasn't, and I'm assuming that is a beta thing. This fits graphically, though, still, especially when you look at the main character and just the world itself. There's an almost Disney Infinity style to the graphics, or even a Skylanders, though it's even far less whimsical than that. Nevertheless, coming away from this, I was sitting back and I was thinking, there's a couple strengths and a couple weaknesses here, and I'm going to go through them. Its strengths has to be in the monsters, both mundane and mythological, which I actually think help a good deal. They don't necessarily have a huge impact on the world around them environmentally, but they've got a very brusque, very blunt way of looking. Really helps to identify them even at a farther distance and gives them this cool, almost rough-hewn look, especially when you see something like the Cyclops themselves. And another strength is something that I've actually complained about a bit in this video, but I want to bring it up. It's a desire to not ramrod the game down a particular path of excellence and tried and true traditions, requirements, and mastery that many other games will put on the player. It's a whimsical title, as I've said before, count how many times I say whimsical and take a drink, that just might cater to people who want a bit more fun without everything making perfect sense or really fitting together or requiring 150 goddamn hours like Odyssey did. The color work, that colorful look to the title that set it apart from its brothers and sisters in the stable of Ubisoft currently. But I promised you we'd look at a couple weaknesses. That can also hurt the game, exactly what I just said. There's a strangely generic, almost MMO, you just heard about it last night and decided to download it look to the game. Also, the puzzles in the title and the way they are handled don't have the subtlety of, let's say, a Zelda or other games like a Tomb Raider, for instance. And Rising also seems to make sure that if there is anything within the game that you have to do, other than a couple complex puzzles we've seen, most of it's done with just one button. There's not a complexity there that would really engage a gamer over a long period of time for some of these, I guess you would call them almost mini games. And lastly, a weakness is their title. Listen, that original title, maybe when you look at this game now, probably wasn't the best. They sort of do have an off-putting feel to them. One very serious and almost epic and grim like some type of HBO show, and the game itself looking more comical. And so they decided to change the name to something that is so generic, nobody's really going to remember it unless there's a problem with the title and people are doing a ton of YouTube videos to try to get clicked. So you're looking at something where the name could actually hurt it. It doesn't inspire a lot. Now, you do play as Phoenix and you are rising, but, well, there you go. Lastly, I think one huge element of this game that will play out is how that humor is portrayed over the entire game and if it fits, if it runs lean, or if it's just hilarious to a lot of people. Humor in games over long stretches has been insanely hard to do. Go look and you can barely count it on maybe two hands, games that do humor that aren't, let's say, a point and click, which has a different presentation style. Initially, this is an odd pairing and the type that I personally am not in love with when it comes to the way they do their humor, but I think it helps really lighten that mood that would normally be pretty much a downer, especially a game like this basically starts out and says, dude, you're the last person on earth, and who's not turned to stone? Well, those are the only guys who are there to try to kill you. They're not going to ever try to help you, though that might not necessarily be true. We'll talk about that later. And lastly, because I already said a lastly, Darksiders. There is a very definitive feeling Darksiders, and I think it's because some of the early areas are a little bit barren, which reminds me of the Darksiders art style and the way it looked initially, not number 3. We're talking about the other ones. That'll be something we'll see as we continue to play. I'm not necessarily saying it reflects it perfectly in the gameplay, and initially, when you look at that, that does sort of make sense because people were comparing Darksiders to the Zelda's games, especially Darksiders 2, and I can see that, but once again, for whatever reason, I see more of, let's say, a Darksiders in this than I do see a Zelda. And if Rise succeeds, it may be relatively from the uninhibited way in which it plays and allows gamers to just run around and do some stuff, and they want more of a sandbox than maybe even the Assassin's Creed games offers, and there doesn't look to be any level gating, though hopefully Valhalla won't have any as well, which comes out in just a little while, everybody. Hope you're excited. That's it for me. I hope you like these kind of previews. If you do, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs up. If you sort of think about it, give it a thumbs up. If you're randomly just hitting this on accident, also give it a thumbs up. Spread it around, share it, whatever you can do. Basically, I want this to be the herpes of video game previews. Anyway, that is it for me. I hope you guys have an awesome week. You can always follow me on Facebook and Twitter and all that crap and become a patron because I need your cash. I buy a lot of drugs. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.